This is Guillermo Mash on behalf of KZFR 90.1 FM, People-Powered Radio. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to the show Bob Erlenbusch from Sacramento, California. And Bob's going to do an appropriate introduction for himself and all the great work you're doing with the homeless community and people experiencing poverty.
Hi, my name is Bob Erlenbusch. I'm the Executive Director of the Sacramento Regional Coalition to End Homelessness, and I am the current Board President for the Board of Directors for the National Coalition for the Homeless in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Bob, and like I said, just briefly before we hit record, is I just did a whole little piece with Paul Bowden outside the RAP office with that beautiful, just poignant No More Homeless Deaths that was given to Paul by the National Coalition for the Homeless for safekeeping. So,
Paul is terrific. Paul was actually on the board for the National Coalition, about 8-9 years ago, for quite a long time, and then he moved from the San Francisco Homeless Coalition to RAP and the Western Regional Advocacy Project, and they're doing great work in California, Oregon, and Colorado.
Yeah, they sure are, Bob. You know, I might actually just jump in right here and read the beginning of your op-ed, and then, you know, what we're going to be focusing on is solutions to homelessness, and I think that op-ed you just wrote for SAC-B really nails it. But you start out by saying, Sacramento city and county governments continue to pursue dual, flawed, conflicting, and contradictory homeless policies. Their recent budget deliberations reaffirmed. One hand pretends to have a hammer to build housing for the homeless, the other a pair of handcuffs to haul them off to jail. Right up below that is the house keys, not handcuffs. So why don't we jump right in on that op-ed, Bob, and give us the scoop on the solutions for homelessness in Sacramento.
The reason that I did the op-ed, we released a report in the beginning of the year. It was a survey of almost 300 homeless youth and adults, and overwhelmingly homeless people were saying here in Sacramento County that 75% of the time they felt really harassed and by police, not necessarily, although 80% had said that they had been in jail for one reason or another, and many for camping, quote-unquote, illegally, even though there's not nearly enough shelter space or affordable housing to house the 2,600 homeless people in our community. So on the one hand, the city and the county are saying, well, you know, we really support the housing first approach, although they haven't put a dime into building affordable housing, yet they continue to criminalize homeless people. So our survey didn't move policymakers. So a couple of weeks ago, we decided to do a survey of homeless service providers, emergency shelters, food banks, etc. And we asked a couple of simple questions. In your opinion as a service provider, do anti-homeless laws create barriers to, and then we gave a lot of options, housing, employment, health care? Overwhelmingly, 90% said yes, and then went off 100%. And this is at 21 surveys, 17, we got an 80% response rate. 100% of the service providers said yes. Anti-homeless ordinances create barriers to employment. 92% said to housing, 75% to health care and mental health care. And then something that policymakers don't even think about, criminalizing young people, the homeless youth in our community and around the country. If they get a ticket, they wind up going to jail. That really creates a tremendous barrier for them getting financial aid to go into college. So on the one hand, policymakers want to have a housing first approach, but then the very policy of criminalizing homeless people, primarily in our community through the anti-camping ordinance, which is in fact a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor goes to warrant because you don't have the $230 to pay it, and then you get rolled up on by law enforcement. They want a warrants check. You've got an outstanding warrant. You go to jail. So the very policy of criminalizing homeless people creates a tremendous barrier to access housing first, the other policy that the city and the county elected officials say that they support, but undercut through continuing to criminalize homeless people.
Yeah, Bob. I mean, actions speak to priorities, and it's follow the money. And Paul Bowden, in an interview I did on KZFR a week ago, he talked at the Fed level. He said they keep talking housing first, but show me the budget of money. There's none. There's nothing for housing first, just like Sacramento. Where they're putting the money is physically criminalization. So, I'm actually
Right.
looking at your next little thing in the op-ed. It said, despite the city subcommittee on homelessness producing 21 options they could have choose from to address the crisis, allocate only $400,000 to physically, housing and services. Yeah, so it's
Right.
absurd.
The one thing they wound up doing is placing a couple of porta potties because we, advocates and homeless people and the Occupy protesters have been saying for more than 2 years. City officials say, well, we really need the anti-camping ordinance because otherwise it creates a public health hazard. But then they close the bathrooms, they lock the bathrooms in Cesar Chavez Park, which is right across, if you don't know Sacramento, right across the street from City Hall, and other parks around the community. So homeless people are forced to use the alleys and parks as their bathroom. What could be more of a public health nightmare than people urinating and defecating in the streets and in the alleys because there's no bathroom that the city council opens up? So at least to their credit, the city council placed a couple of porta potties close to Loaves and Fishes here, which Loaves and Fishes, for those of you who don't know Sacramento, is provides a whole range of services, not shelter, but they feed about anywhere between 800 and 1,000 homeless people every day. So at least there's bathrooms that people can have a dignified way to do their bodily functions like the rest of us.
I know there's a lot going on in Sacramento. Maybe if we could land on some solutions that seem to be working, what the city or the elected officials seem to be doing that you would give praise towards.
Well, they did increase funding to provide 24-hour access to emergency shelters. A couple of Salvation Army and I think Volunteers of America. So that's positive. The good thing is that it's on the radar for the City Council and the Board of Supervisors, and perhaps, hopefully, a game changer. And that's how I ended the editorial this Sunday. Is that our new mayor-elect, former Senator Darrell Steinberg, now Mayor-elect Darrell Steinberg, is a strong advocate for people experiencing homelessness, especially around mental health issues. Even when he was on the city council in Sacramento, before he went to the state legislature, was and continues to be opposed to criminalizing homeless people. So hopefully that's a game changer, and then we can get to real solutions to ending homelessness, ultimately, pretty obviously, but that this answer doesn't really lack the political will in most communities around the country. The answer to ending homelessness is a combination of affordable housing coupled with an employment and income strategy so people can afford to pay rent.
So one thing I'd ask too, part of this segment was on the solutions, and it was an excellent summary. Thank you for that. Bob
Sure.
Erlenbusch from Sacramento. And Bob is the Executive Director of Sacramento Regional Coalition to End Homelessness and Board President of National Coalition for the Homeless. So maybe a little bit of landing time, Bob, for how you think it's being covered in the media in Sacramento. What's your thoughts on that, how homelessness is being covered?
Well, in general, I've been doing this work for 32 years. If you would have told me in November of 1984 that I'd still be doing this, all the national advocates thought, well, we'll be 5 years and out. The answer is obvious. We just need more housing. Over the last 30 years, there's sort of been an evolution of the way that the media has covered homelessness. It started off with everybody who was homeless was a transient. They couldn't possibly be from our community. It took many years to educate, the media that the homeless in your community overwhelmingly are from your community. They went to high school there, they had jobs there, they had homes, and for a whole variety of reasons are now homeless in your community. And that is true for Sacramento. Recent survey, 75% of the homeless in our community are from our community. So there has been a slow evolution of acknowledging that, this really is not people coming in from other parts of the country because of the weather or, all kinds of other reasons. That ultimately it is an affordable housing issue. Although, we still have our share of editorials that continue to say, it's illegal for homeless people to camp outside even though they have no other choice, that they're they're burning down the American River because of illegal campsites, which isn't true. They're drug addicts. It still perpetuates a number of stereotypes around who's homeless, not only in our community, but in your community in Chico, San Francisco, and around the country.
Yeah, I travel a fair amount around all the different Northern Californians, and one thing I would add, Bob, to the whole point in time, for people that don't know, every odd year the HUD requires a point in time. We count homeless people, one day of the year. But as you had mentioned, Bob, all the point in times in every county that they do this, most of the people are from the county. But what I find in the street level work I do, Bob, the ones that say they're not from the county are here for very good reasons, like they're following a spouse, or they're following a child that's been adopted, or they came to Butte County and they got beaten up by their boyfriend and went homeless for domestic violence. So
I totally agreed. And to show you how crazy, even though the federal government mandates that, you do this homeless count every 2 years, which to me is a colossal waste of time, because it seriously undercounts youth. And let me just give you one example. A couple of years ago when we did our homeless count, they counted 5 homeless youth. We have 12,000 kids and young adults from kindergarten to 12th grade who go to school every day in our county. So the homeless count around the country undercounts youth, it undercounts families, so it can give you like a ballpark figure. And we've done a good job around the country, including our community, of educating policymakers. Don't take that number too seriously. That it's probably significantly higher for our community. The last homeless count was 2,600 homeless people. We prefer to say it's a range of 2,600 to about 7,500, maybe even as high as 10,000.
Do a shout out Shahara Hyatt for the Homeless Youth Projects based out of Sacramento, and she's brilliant.
Oh, she has done a great job of educating policymakers around not only children and youth who are homeless, but there was a big report that came out from the Cal State University system that has 400,000 students in their student body in California. 8 to 12% of their student body is homeless, and somewhere around 20 to 25% are food insecure or hungry. In other words, at Cal State University Sacramento, with a student body of over 30,000 students, figure there's about 2,400 that are homeless that the homeless count didn't even think about counting, and hopefully will in the future. But Shahara has done a brilliant job on this issue.
Yeah, I'm actually part of a homeless task force for youth that just started up about six months ago, and we did some post-mortem. I always hate that word. We just did a little post-mortem. It's like, oh my gosh, they're dead. But they had up a Homeless Connect, and there was just an awful lot. You're not going to be surprised, but our listeners need to know there was a lot of talk around why didn't more youth show up at the Project Homeless Connect. So there's this real stigma. And, if you're a youth you think about, you put yourself back, I don't know how old you are as a listener, to someone that's 14 or 15. If someone says, hey, it's time to release you early. Does anyone want to go to Project Homeless Connect? Or you raise your hands. Let's raise our hands and say we're homeless. There's a lot of shaming that's going on that's perpetuated by the media, because they put a lot of these stereotypes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'll hand it back to you, Bob, because I know you got some things to say around that.
Absolutely. The homeless count here in Sacramento counted, 240 homeless youth. But Wind Youth Services in downtown, midtown Sacramento last year saw almost 900 unduplicated youth, so homeless youth. So there is homeless youth, even more than adults try to hide, as you said, because of the shame of being homeless, also being just young and trying to navigate a very complex system, just starting with lack of transportation. I mean, so many, and then if you layer that with a relatively high percent of homeless youth, not only in our community but around the country, are gay, lesbian, questioning, or a relatively high percent are transgender. So very, very complex, even almost more complex issue for homeless youth than for adults.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I would actually put out there. I've been doing this. It's so fun, Bob, because I'm an older guy. So I show up and I know the issue quite well. But I've only been working it 5 years. People have been thinking I've been doing it my whole life. But no, I had a separate job. But I had said, which really gives me the most hope, Bob. About a year into this, I said, we'll know we're doing something to solve this problem when we have the papers reporting on homelessness on the 4th of July. San Francisco Chronicle led with an opinion piece on the front page July 3rd. So I see that as a big, big win that we need to build upon.
Yeah, it was brilliant. San Francisco had over that weekend 70 news outlets all reporting on the issue of homelessness. So, I mean, I didn't time it for my editorial to be on July 3rd, but I'm glad that it was.
Yes, that's true. Yours too, Bob. Thank you for bringing that up. Bob, we're getting kind of towards the end here. Actually, I went over, which is really good. This is an excellent interview. I'm going to do a forward promo because I just had an interview with Monday Night Mission out of L.A. I don't know if you heard what they're doing, but they've got a 200-car...
Midnight Mission?
Yeah, Monday Night Mission's coming up on the 30th, man, to petition the governor to declare a homeless emergency shelter crisis. And I'm like, yes. Man, I'm there. Are you going to be there for that, Bob?
Yes. Yeah, there's a big push. There's actually, if your listeners can go on, change.org.
Yeah.
There's a petition online that calls upon the governor of California to declare a statewide emergency shelter crisis. What that does is allows jurisdictions up and down the state of California to use empty buildings as shelters, but it also relaxes zoning laws so we can build affordable housing much faster, so we don't have to go through as many land use decisions, which is ultimately the answer to ending homelessness, in addition to expanding substance abuse programs, mental health programs, etc.
Well, I really appreciate this, Bob. I'm looking forward to meeting you on the 30th. I'm there. I'm doing a lot of, I'm not even going to say cajoling, just getting the word out there to get a little mini caravan going down 30th to kind of support that. So I look forward to meeting you and maybe doing a little interview follow-up with you down there, Bob.
Absolutely.
But thanks.
Anytime. I appreciate it.